What is the strategy of a global, of a global Britain in Africa? Huge continent of over 50 countries. Are you targeting specific regions and specific industries?
Well, Laura, thank you very much for having me on. Yes, you're absolutely right. The Prime Minister is today hosting the UK-Africa Investment Summit. We've got 21 countries represented here, which represent around 80% of Africa's economy. This is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that the UK should be the partner of choice for these economies. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Africa is a growing economic powerhouse. We've got 8 of the 15 fastest growing economies in the world in Africa. You've got a really very young population. There's a youth dividend. We've got 62% of people under the age of 25. And by 2050, 1 in 4 consumers in the world will be African. So there's a real opportunity there for us to showcase what the UK has to offer in terms of innovation, in terms of tech, in terms of infrastructure and finance. And I'm talking to here from the London Stock Exchange, where we're going to be doing a dual listing this morning of the first Kenyan local currency bond, a green bond. You know, I was at the listing of this green bond precisely a week ago in Nairobi, and I'm really pleased that this is going to happen this morning. And it just shows that the City of London is a huge financial centre, the preeminent financial centre in the world, and there is a real opportunity for us to do more in terms of investors from here going into Africa.
So, a very good morning to you, Alok. It's Manis in Dubai.
Morning.
I caught up with Cyril Ramaphosa before Christmas, and he said, look, we have the ambitions here in South Africa, I'm talking about specifically, $100 billion of new investment. They've got $16 billion done. But one of the big issues is that has bedeviled investing in Africa is, of course, corruption. And he's intent on doing down in terms of state capture and on corruption. Is that the biggest real risk when I go to invest in Africa, or is it overplayed and overdone?
Well, I think it's interesting you mention that particular issue. Of course, the UK is totally opposed to any form of corruption, and we work very hard with developing countries to reinforce and strengthen their institutions, and of course working with them as well in terms of improving their rankings when it comes to ease of doing business. So I've just come back from Kenya. Kenya has gone in the World Bank ease of doing business rankings from 113 in I think 2016 to 56 in the last year. And you know, part of that is the assistance that the UK government has provided in terms of helping them digitise their tax systems, in terms of helping better clearance and quicker clearance for customs. Those are the sort of issues, very practically, where the UK government is helping developing economies in Africa as well, so that we can make it easier and better to do business with that continent.
Alok, China has used international development funding to help build influence across not only Africa, but also the Caribbean. In your approach, does this pose a threat or an inspiration to how the UK is going to approach investment in Africa through international development funding as well?
Well, we obviously have a different approach. And as I said, I think one of the big areas for us where we have a huge advantage is, of course, the City of London. And I've talked about the fact that we are supporting the development of local currency bonds. And it's worth pointing out that actually there's about $140 billion of aid money that goes in every year from around the world into developing countries. But actually the UN itself has estimated that there needs to be an extra $2.5 trillion a year going in up to 2030 every year, so that we can try and meet the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we've all signed up to. That money will have to, in my view, come from the private sector, and that's why I think we have a unique role to play as a centre for financial excellence here in London.
The other big driving force that will come into play, of course, this year is the African Free Trade Zone. It's going to be the largest in the world, 1.2 billion and a gross domestic product of $2.5 billion. Do you think investors are cognizant enough, if they harness that free trade agreement, and it's going to be a challenge to harness that, Alok, isn't it? But is that the prize?
Yes, absolutely, and that will be one of the topics that we'll be discussing at the summit today. Absolutely, that's a prize. As you say, it represents a huge market where free trade can flow. And from a UK perspective as well, of course, as we leave the European Union, there is a huge opportunity for us. We've already got trade continuing agreements with 35 countries. With another 11, we have got trade agreements in place. That represents around 40% of our trade with Africa right now. So yes, I mean, all of these represent opportunities for the international community, but particularly for UK investors. And that's what the African Investment Summit is all about today, presenting the UK as the partner of choice for Africa. And of course, showcasing what Africa has to offer the UK as well.
Alok, how much will the UK be looking to invest in francophone African countries as well as former British colonies?
Well, of the 21 countries, we of course have a range of countries who are coming. Some will be francophone countries, and the 21 that we've got actually represent, all regions of Africa, and of course people that we have the closest economic ties with, the countries which have the greatest economic potential. So you will see today announcement of a multi-billion dollar deals in total. The breakdown will be available, but of course we've been very clear that this summit is about talking to the whole of Africa.